Now we don't really have a separate granular engine. This is just a mode that you can activate within the sample engine. So what's happening here is that instead of playing back the sample as is, like a traditional sampler, granular synthesis is applied to the sample. What exactly is granular synthesis? Now if I was to zoom into this sample here, which I can do by just clicking and dragging like this, just imagine that a tiny segment of this sample has been selected for playback. It can be looped, the playback direction can be changed. Now instead of just playing back that one tiny segment, we can introduce other segments. Maybe we can borrow some sounds from the right or some sounds from the left and kind of randomize that. We can randomize the length of the loop. So all these things go into granular synthesis. So instead of just playing back the sample as is, think of it more like a creative playback mode for a sampler. Alright, so let's see what happens now. I just turned on granular mode. Let's just quickly listen to what the sample sounds like without any granular synthesis applied. I had to change the sample start here. Just adjust that to the very beginning. Alright, now let's turn on the granular mode. Now over here we have the density parameter, where we get to choose how dense we want the sound to be. If I reduce it, you notice that very few grains are being used. If I increase the density, a lot more grains. And obviously they also overlap and increase the overall loudness of the sound. We have more randomization options here, so density itself can be randomized. The different modes of randomization make it more dense or less dense. The direction of playback, right now it's 50-50, backwards and forward. Maybe I just want forward playback, or I just want backward playback. I'll leave it back in the center here. Pitch. Again, randomization of pitch. The start position. When you maximize that, it's kind of spreading all across the entire sample and picking segments to playback. And the different modes here, both, after, before, all based off of what the original playback position is. Now, what's happening here is that one tiny segment out of this entire sample is playing back. Now, when you pick a random tiny segment from a sample, there could be clicks and pops. So that's why there's always this thing known as windowing that's applied to each of those tiny segments. This is the triangular shape windowing. That's why it kind of has like a soft attack and soft release. But again, think about it at a very granular level. If I switch the triangular shape more to this ramp down shape, now you start to notice clicks at the beginning part of the sample. We can switch the other way around. Still getting clicks, but on the tail end of the grain. And then we have all these different grain envelope shapes. I like the Gaussian one, because you can make it really narrow. If I increase the density, you can create some pretty interesting effects here. And again, keep in mind, I'm just playing one note. Alright, other things we can randomize. The size. Let's go for a really tiny grain. Or a very large grain. Be careful of the volume clipping as you adjust these parameters. So essentially everything here is to just randomize various aspects of the granular engine to introduce more variety in the sound. If I play multiple notes, you'll start to notice how that classical guitar sound has become more like a pad sound. And that's more typical of most granular synthesis modes. Take a pluck-like sound and convert it to an ambient pad-like sound. You can set the limit for a maximum number of grains, because as you increase the density, as you play additional notes, the overall loudness, as we notice, can increase. So you can kind of limit it to ensure that it doesn't go over a particular number of grains here. The maximum here is 256 individual grains. We can introduce some stereo widening. So we have all these different grains. Instead of playing them back in the center, we can spread them across the stereo image. We can randomize the volume of each grain. And I really like the sound of that. Has a very organic quality to it. Now that was just this one sample. Let's try it on something else, like the marimba here. Just for reference, this is the original marimba, and this is the granular version. Let's try the next one here. This is a steel acoustic guitar. Granular synthesis usually sounds really good with some delay and reverb. This sounds really nice. And the original sample is an electric piano sample. Alright, so that is the entire sample engine. Very, very powerful, as you can see. In the next tutorial, we will check out the harmonic engine.